All right, so breaking tonight, President Donald Trump says a deal with Iran is complete. A signing ceremony is expected to take place Friday in Switzerland. Joining us now is Aaron David Miller, Carnegie Endowment for International Peace Senior Fellow and former Arab-Israeli negotiator. Aaron, it's good to have you with us. So a lot of moving pieces tonight. Someone you know that we all respect around here, Richard Haass, was with us a few minutes ago and was saying, you know, we're still a far way off from Friday. Anything can happen between now and then. And even if something is signed on Friday, it could potentially not even last to Saturday. I'm wondering, from the way you have read, the news lines tonight out of this deal or around this deal, what, if anything, you think might be different this time around to give either you and others a sense of hope that this time is actually the end of the war? Or if you don't see it that way and share the same sentiments that Richard does.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the good news is you're going to get a 60-day respite. You can buy the time and space if, in fact, you're going to be having serious negotiations on most of the issues that will be identified in a still not released memorandum of understanding. And that memorandum of understanding, it seems to me, why they haven't released it, it's worrisome. It could easily turn into a memorandum of misunderstanding. Look, I think it's going to be very difficult, even after 60 days and very little progress is made. I'm assuming that will be the case, that this administration is going to find it almost impossible to return to the kind of military action and military campaign that was waged roughly from February 28th to April 7, 8. I just don't see how most of the original war aims, restriction of ballistic missiles, no. Cutting ties with proxies, no. Changing the regime, moderating the regime, fracturing the regime, no. Ending Iran's nuclear infrastructure, no. I mean, they've got 11 tons of uranium enriched since this administration walked out of the JCPOA, enriched at various levels. It's conceivable that you could get some progress on a cessation or a moratorium on enrichment and maybe find a way to dilute or ship out the 900 pounds of highly enriched uranium at 60%. You need a couple of weeks to get to 90%, which is fissile material, it's bomb grade. But all of that, frankly, to me right now is a thought experiment. One last point. This has all of the vibes of the Gaza deal. One and done. Hostages out, war ended kind of in Gaza, but none of the other points in this plan. Gaza is broken, dysfunctional, divided, and sporadically violent. I have a feeling that this is conceivable that that's where this is going. Naval blockades, straits open to a certain degree, maybe even fully if we're prepared to pay the price. But I can't imagine that you're going to end up with issues that will truly set the clock back on the Iranian nuclear program and position this administration and its successors to somehow contain what I believe will be an Iranian accelerated effort to get a bomb.
So President Trump today took 28 minutes to call up the New York Times' David Sanger and told him that there was daylight between himself and Netanyahu, saying that he's, quote, a very difficult guy. And to be honest with you, he should be very thankful for us for doing this, because if Iran had a nuclear weapon, Israel wouldn't be around for 2 hours. How do you see the daylight that exists in that relationship between Trump and Netanyahu at this present juncture?
It's really quite remarkable. I mean, I worked for administrations Jimmy Carter to Bush 43, and you could throw in Obama and Biden. No American president, maybe with the possible exception of Eisenhower, whose language was not nearly as explicit or profane publicly as the president's. No American president has ever talked about an Israeli prime minister in the way Donald Trump has. And I think Netanyahu is in a box. October, you're going to have elections. He needs Donald Trump actively campaigning for him, a Donald Trump who is still more popular in Israel than Netanyahu is. So the administration, the president, has enormous leverage over Netanyahu. Whether he's going to use it, if in fact the Israelis and Hezbollah continue their conflict in Lebanon, which could undermine this broader arrangement, remains to be seen. But it's really quite extraordinary.
We also have in this new New York Times piece, Trump spoke on the phone with reporters there, his claim that the Strait of Hormuz is going to be permanently toll-free. Do you think this early into all of this, that that's a safe statement for the president to make?
I think there's no way the president could make such a statement. He can't predict the future. Look, the Iranians have weaponized geography. And in the Middle East, geography is destiny. Their fingerprints, their hands are all over the straits. I think it's in their interest to see the straits open. What they're going to demand to have it open, it may well be that certain oil exporters, shipping companies will agree to pay the price. You may get separate arrangements for various countries. It's just that I think that, and that's the problem, right? February 27th, the day before the war started, the straits were free and unfettered. And no matter how the administration dresses up the unfreezing of Iranian assets, since money is fungible, they can basically say, well, we're not paying the Iranians to open the straits. But in essence, they are. And if the vice president of the United States shows up in Geneva to sign this with the lead Iranian negotiator, Mohammad Ghalibaf, whose reputation for repressing and suppressing a regime, facilitating a regime that kills, tortures, and murders its own citizens, if there's a handshake there, it's going to put to rest and essentially bury the notion that Donald Trump's initial effort to tell the Iranian people that help is on the way, they're going to end up strengthening and emboldening the very regime that the president sought to change. That is one of the cruelest, that and the straits, I think, are one of the cruelest ironies of this war of choice.
So to pick up on that point, Aaron, let me get your thoughts on if you are in any of the Arab capitals of the Persian Gulf over the next several weeks. How are you evaluating what has happened over the past 100 days with the war and the fact that the United States, which to some extent had guaranteed you this security blanket or this security posture, has now exposed you and put you in the front lines of this war with Iran? I say that because in the very same article that Elise just referenced, in the 28-minute interview that Donald Trump gave to the New York Times, where he said this is going to be a permanently toll-free, I want to read you a part of it. He writes, David Sanger writes, Mr. Trump also insisted that if Iran failed to reach a final nuclear accord with the United States, he would restart military attacks on Tehran or make the United States the guardian of the Middle East in return for 20% of the region's revenues. How do they interpret what is happening right now between the United States and Iran?
Oh, I think the Gulf states are furious at the Israelis for sure, with the possible exception of the Emiratis. Remember, the Emiratis were the recipients of Iron Dome. And they criticized their Gulf neighbors for failing to do more to stand up in the face of Iranian drones and missiles. I think the Gulf states basically also resent the United States, resent this war, because this war has compromised the Dubai model. The notion that the Gulf is going to be turned into Gulf states, the entrepot, sports, culture, high-tech, AI, computing centers, an economic and financial entrepot, all of this depends on security and stability. And I suspect each Gulf state, the Omanis and the Qataris, have already cut their deals with the Iranians. The Emirates, the Reuters is reporting, I can't confirm it, that they've transferred billions of dollars. The Emiratis denied it. To Iran. The Saudis, I think you could kiss goodbye any prospect of normalization, certainly with this Israeli government, the most extreme right wing in Israel's history. So I think the biggest losers in all of this, other than the United States and Benjamin Netanyahu's own aspirations for regime change, I think, are the Gulf states. They're going to face an angry, bitter, and still quite resilient Iranian regime. Therein hangs the tale. I think it's going to be fascinating to see exactly how these Gulf states comport themselves in navigating a narrow course between their dependence on the United States and the need to find some modus vivendi with the now controlled Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Iran.
What role, if any, do you think Israel's strikes in Lebanon in recent days may have played in wrapping this whole deal up? Do you think that it likely, actually allowed the Iranians to extract more concessions from the U.S.?
Yeah, I think, I don't believe in conspiracies, but you could argue that it actually accelerated the deal because the Iranians stayed their hand. The Israelis struck in Hezbollah in the Dahya in southern Beirut. They killed one person. And the Iranians, I think, have basically said this evening that there were a couple contested points in the memorandum of understanding, hopefully not a memorandum of misunderstanding, that in essence were improved as a consequence of the fact that the president persuaded them not to strike the Israelis. So, this is just another cruel irony. And what happens when, in fact, you launch a war of choice, you overestimate your own capacities, and you fundamentally underestimate the capacities of your adversary. It's really a poster child for the law of unintended consequences, and they're bad consequences.
Aaron David Miller, thank you for being with us.